Galen, consciousness studies is a major subfield in neuroscience and in philosophy of mind and in biology in general today. And the sense is that it really began 1990-ish with neural correlates of consciousness, the Journal of Consciousness Studies, and many engagements with philosophers. You've shown how this has a very long history, predates that in terms of conversation. I'd like you to give me a sense of the historical background of where we are today based on what's been going on for the last century or so.
You ask about the last century, but I think I need at least 3 or 4 centuries for this.
Okay, fair enough.
The nature of consciousness, that's been at the very top of the philosophical agenda, and indeed the scientific agenda in the largest sense, ever since Descartes, really. Ever since the coming into fashion, if you like, of so-called corpuscularian mechanical philosophy, the view that the physical world is just little bits with different shapes bumping into each other, because that made very acute the problem of how consciousness could be anything to do with that. And of course there was tremendous religious input all the way through, because there have been materialists, by which I mean real materialists in my sense, that is, materialists who were real realists about consciousness, totally believing in what people call qualia, or experience of taste and sounds and so on. There have been real materialists all the way through. And I think I could produce for you from every single year in the 20th century some quotation saying, this is the top problem in philosophy. So didn't just start in the 1990s. It was always at the top in philosophy. What did happen around then, except that psychologists will dispute this and say that it happened in the 1970s, is that behaviorism began to lose its absolute dominance as a research methodology. And of course there was a great wave of popular interest, and that was basically, it rose with the internet. And Dave Chalmers, his famous remark about the hard problem. But I could find many previous statements of that this is the great hard problem. And so on. I remember Jerry Fodor said that when he was a boy in grad school, there were 2 problems, the mind-body problem in the 50s and the problem of other minds. So that already takes you back 20 years. And I believe that the best discussion of the problem in the 20th century was going on in the 1920s and 30s. And many crucial things were forgotten around 1960. And with the result that, to be provocative perhaps, I think that the debate since then has been of far less worth than what happened in the first half of the 20th century.
What was that back then? What are examples?
The key thing was Russell's, well, it wasn't just Russell, it was everybody. Many people, including an interesting woman called Grace de Laguna, who saw that, and Poincaré, people who saw that physics is an extremely abstract theory, and it, as Russell keeps on saying, it tells us nothing about the ultimate intrinsic nature of physical stuff. All it tells us is about structural facts, about relational facts. Eddington has some beautiful phrases. He talks about physics, science will never give you the inner, unget-at-able nature of things. And somehow, from the 1960s on, people began to think that physics was actually nailing down the true essence of the physical. But it's a fact of principle about the very nature of what physics is, that it could never do that. And actually it was recently reaffirmed by Stephen Hawking, who says, and I quote, physics is just a set of equations. It doesn't, and then he goes on, doesn't tell you what it's really about the intrinsic nature of what it's really about, and therefore it leaves completely open the possibility that the ultimate intrinsic nature might be something of the nature of consciousness. And that's what Russell thinks.
And was that a prevailing opinion during those early decades?
It was a commonplace that physics and science and physical sciences in general could not tell you about the ultimate intrinsic nature of things. It was just silent. Physics is completely silent on this question, as Russell.
Was that energized by the quantum theory, which developed during that same time?
No, I think it was obviously, it was boosted by that, no doubt. The general sense of the nature being utterly incomprehensible. But the basic idea there was absolutely firmly in place before. Actually, I think you can find it in Robert Boyle in the 17th century. It tells you what things do, but it doesn't tell you what they are.
And was the vast implications of that, was that recognized during those early years?
I think it was. And that's why people were entirely open to the idea that panpsychism, as it were, was on the table. So Roy Wood Sellers, another excellent philosopher of that time who's been almost entirely forgotten, says, I quote again, I like to quote, but maybe not word for word. He says, panpsychism must be considered a species of naturalism. Now today that would be thought to be absurd.
Yeah. So what happened then? Why is the general feeling such that this has just emerged? Is it because of the internet? People focusing on it broadly?
No, I think it's that, I can't remember the name of that fish in Finding Nemo that only has a memory of three. Ellen DeGeneres. Philosophy forgets. It simply forgets. There is one man who fully remembers all this called Grover Maxwell in the 70s, who says it. It just got lost. And people get excited and they want to write papers. And there were these two very influential papers, as you know, in the 1950s by Ullin Place and Jack Smart that sort of kicked off the whole mind-brain identity theory.
Identity theory, right.
But that was a disaster. Do you want me to tell you why?
But that's still a prevalent view in some parts.
No, I'm a mind-brain identity theorist, but nearly all the people who called themselves mind-brain identity theorists were no such thing, because they thought that theory meant denying the existence of real consciousness. So they would say things like, consciousness is just neurons firing.
Right.
And they thought that they knew what neurons firing was, and they thought that meant that there wasn't any real consciousness. But that is not the true mind-brain identity theory. The true mind-brain identity theory is that consciousness, the real technicolor thing, is just neurons firing. So it's been an extraordinary, it's been a shambles, really.
Well, a major part of some materialist point of view is what I'd call radical identity theory, where the neurons firing are the qualia.
That's it.
Just like
that is it.
Just like the morning star and the evening star are the same thing. You can't take away one without the other.
That is what I call the real identity theory.
Yeah, but it's being used to get an opposite conclusion to what you come to. It's being used to say that that consciousness is that firing, but the fundamental thing is the physical. The consciousness is the I don't know if they use epiphenomena, but it is sort of the process of that, sort of a natural process. It's like, I don't know, you run a computer, it's the heat. It just
No, that's where they beg the question in the sense of excluding the other position from the start. Because they think they know what neurons firing is. And they think that one of the things they know is it is not in itself intrinsically conscious. But that is precisely the claim that's being made against
So
them.
this is very kind of interesting in that you have a similar view in terms of this identity theory.
Yes.
But it's just which is the fundamental part and which is the not derivative part.
If you like, the issue of the relation between the mind and the body or the brain has been at the very top of the philosophical agenda for hundreds of years, and with particular intensity in the last century. And there have been many people who have been what I call real mind-brain identity theorists, people who are completely realist about consciousness, but who say that it is just neurons firing. So this doesn't degrade consciousness, it upgrades neurons, as it were. Neurons are far more extraordinary than you thought.